the shit. You'll find a hidden treasure. The very worst things are funny as fuck. And we know this much is true. We know this is true. When you laugh at the world, she laughs right back at you.
So, welcome everybody. Today is a new day and a new episode of That's Funny Mel. And I usually don't do an intro, so today I'm going to do one, and I'm going to say all the things that people say to like and subscribe and share and all those things to, help spread the word and help the show grow and to give me the support that I know you want to give me. And I just haven't reminded you how. So there's that. And today I have a guest, and his name is Russell, and he is a podcast host, a conservative podcast host, and I'm really excited to have him. Full disclosure, I don't know if I mentioned this in my last podcast, but I think most people know I'm a lifelong liberal, but I left the Democratic Party maybe a year ago, maybe less, I'm not sure, and I'm a registered independent now, and I feel politically homeless, and I don't know what the fuck's happened to the Democratic Party. So that's kind of where I'm at politically. I have not been completely red-pilled, maybe a little, I don't know, but I'm very curious to dig into what I've always thought is the other side and really try to understand everything that I don't know. So Russell, welcome to the show, and please tell the guests everything you want them to know.
Well, Mel, thank you very much for inviting me onto your show today. I really appreciate it. And I think that for the moderate liberals and conservatives, I feel like we can agree on a lot of things these days, which hasn't always been the case in previous years. So my name is Russell. I'm from Canada. So your friendly neighbors up to the north, and that's an illusion. We're not that friendly, but we'll get into that later on. And yeah, I host a podcast called The Canadian Conservative, and I talk to a variety of different guests, generally conservative leaning, although interestingly enough, I've made some interesting friends recently, including socialists, even a kind of devout, almost communist, and that's kind of taken some pretty right-leaning stances, if only to get out of the madness that he's seeing as well within society and that. So I've definitely made some interesting friends along the way. I've been podcasting for a couple of years now, and although I focused on small businesses during the lockdown, I kind of found that when I was looking at the metrics that people were interested in learning about politics. That's where all my numbers were going towards, was the episodes where I was a little bit more political with people. And so you got to go where the numbers go, and the numbers say that talk politics. And then I learned that I'm pretty late to a very big drama YouTube sphere of political analogies and that, covering people from like Lauren Southern to Vosh to all sorts of different wackadoodle characters on the interweb spheres and that. And so I thought, well, why not stake a claim somewhere and see what happens, right? Maybe something good happens. Maybe I lose my job. Who knows? Well, it's Canada. We'll see. So that's who I am.
Thank you for that. I love hearing that you're afraid you might lose your job, because I recently graduated from college, even though I'm 49 years old. Yay me. I've done many other things and had many other lives, but I really felt like this was missing because I would like to move on to other things. So I got my bachelor's in psychology, and I've got summer off. I was really shocked by some things that I've seen on Twitter in the last year, and just needed to fire the podcast back up to talk about these specific things. But yeah, and then somehow the algorithm led me to you.
Yeah,
and
it always does.
Oh, does
Yeah, it leads you where you want to go. Surprisingly enough, the algorithm, you mentioned psychology, the algorithm used by Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and those algorithms, they're the most powerful psychological tools that we have in the computing sphere right now, because if it's all about selling you ads and you become the ad. And so what it does is it takes your every single tweet, every single Facebook post, every single Instagram post, all your hashtags, all your contacts and their information and everything that you've allowed them when you say yes to allowing them to look at your contacts and that, and it spins it into this cycle. And then what it does is it wants you to constantly be on the platform watching more ads. And so this algorithm draws people together in ways that are unexpected and interesting, exciting, and also detrimental as well.
I'm going to find that part out really soon, based on the episodes that are coming up, because I think more people are going to be listening, and I think some people aren't going to like what they're hearing, and I'm scared. but I'm doing it because I'm scared, because I shouldn't be scared, because I live in fucking America. And why should I be scared? So I just graduated, I have summer off, but I'm going to need to be employed. Like, we've been broke for a long ass time while my husband's been supporting me so I can go to school. And that needs to end so we can move to a nicer neighborhood, because I live in a fucking shithole, in a shit show. There's 2 refrigerators out on my front lawn right now. It's glorious. So beautiful. It doesn't depress me at all to live here. Anyway, so I need to get a job, and I'm scared. I might change my name legally. I don't know what I do. I don't know, but I have to speak out, and that's how I feel.
Well, what's become quite dangerous, and something that I think we all need to be worried about, is how comfortable employers have become at their intrusions into our private lives, um, and how they feel that they can regulate our private speech and our private lives, and that they have the right to do this, and that we owe them kind of our living and that sort of thing. So we owe it to them to let them into our lives. And what I mean by that, to give you an example, now I'll say this: I'm not a big, you probably guessed by conservative, I'm not a big fan of the porn industry. I'm really not. I think that I think that the porn has done an immense amount of damage to our society and to people in general. Um, and all my own research in that, through my own university experience, uh, studying criminal behavior and stuff like that, has shown that a lot of offenses that involve sexual misconduct um, can be linked back to a fair amount of porn consumption, and that in some cases. So I'm not a big fan of the porn industry, but I was very intrigued because in British Columbia, there's a teacher there, and she is working as a teaching aid for children in grade school with disabilities. Very tough job. And she's not making enough money because Vancouver's like the California of Canada. It's completely unaffordable to anyone that's not a billionaire. And it's overrun by rampant neoliberalism and that. But she had an OnlyFans page, and it's behind a paywall.
Oh, yeah.
It's behind, she doesn't advertise it or anything like that. And somehow the school found out about it. So I'm assuming it was probably a parent that saw some content, and parent's spouse was like, what are you looking at? Oh, look, there's the special ed teacher, from school. And so they lodged a complaint saying that's inappropriate for this special ed teacher to run an OnlyFans page. Now she came out in defense and said, like, look, they don't pay me enough money. I'm not advertising my content to any parents or anyone in the community. I was using a pseudonym. I never referenced my job or anything like that. It in no way, shape, or form was the school ever represented in this. And she took extra precautions to ensure, of course, that her identity was as concealed as possible when you're doing porn, I guess.
Yeah.
Because nothing's really concealed. And the school has ordered her that she cannot run an OnlyFans page. It breaches their code of conduct. It's unprofessional. And so she has to choose the school or her porn page. And to me, that is a no-win situation. Well, if she gets off OnlyFans and gets another job that, brings in the income. But to me, the school should have no business in her life. And I know that's not a very necessarily conservative take overall. Well, more libertarian take, I'd say, and that. But I don't think the school her employer has any right to dictate that. And if anything, they've ruined her chances of future employment, and that by making a big public ordeal and spectacle out of things. So we have this situation now where we're seeing increasingly employers want their employees' social media pages, they want to scour them for problematic content, and it's all in an effort to try to, I guess, manage impression management, which, if studying psychology and that, that's a psychopathic trait, right? Impression management. Psychopaths can't feel emotion, so
Oh.
they impression manage the best they can until people figure out their scheme. Sociopaths to a lesser degree. So it's very interesting to me, and we're seeing it more and more now. I have friends that work in the government here in Canada, and they tell me that now in order to get a security clearance, you have to submit your social media content to the government for them to evaluate if you can get a security clearance or not. And it just worries me because, again, now we're letting our employers into our personal lives, and we're giving them carte blanche access to determine what content we can and cannot consume. And it's rampant in Canada. And I gave it some thought a little while ago, and I thought to myself, my employer and that, they're pretty easygoing in that, but if someone had a complaint about my content and they found out where I worked and they went and they submitted a complaint, maybe I'd lose my job. And I just find it's very interesting because if I had started a YouTube channel and I went on there and I said, listen, everyone, I'm out here being my true authentic self. And, we need to decolonize Canada. It's just filled with a bunch of white supremacist racists. And I need to do the work, and I need to decolonize my mind, my bookshelf, my garden. And everyone needs to read more, far left literature, and that everyone needs to read the Communist Manifesto and take on very far left stances. I could say, I think every child should be chemically castrated if they wanted and have their genitals removed, and that's just normal, and that should be accepted and celebrated by everyone in society. And I think that women's spaces shouldn't exist anymore because we're, an equity-based society, and I could go down the rabbit hole of all the really left-leaning ideological factors.
Mhm.
And you know what? I would never lose my job for that. I could have some right-wing pundit that would report it to my employer, and they would probably ask me to start a podcast with their company in that, and let's, celebrate more and more stuff in that, more left. So to me, it shows a blatant double standard where politically you can be very, very left leaning, and that's all right. And our employers celebrate it. I mean, we're in Canada, we don't have Pride Month, we have Pride Season. So we're in month one of Pride season in Canada. It's not going too well for the leftists so far. But it's a worrying trend of just how our government and these institutions that should be politically neutral overall have taken a stake in all this. And in many cases, they've backed a very specific horse. And I won't get into like ESG stuff and all that, but I tend not to get into that because for normal people, they hear about that stuff and it sounds like conspiracy theory nonsense to them.
Yeah.
And that's why I say let's just focus on the stuff that we can see directly. And what we can see is that there is in Canada, we have a very, very activist court. Our court system is captured completely by far left ideology. We have the human rights tribunals in Canada, and they're very interesting because they're almost exclusively run by people that would praise Antifa and praise these far left, non-moderate, very hyper political groups. And then they pass policies and things like that, and they put people in bad positions, and they expose hatred and stuff like that. But
Mm.
and all it's done is, it's, in my opinion, it's provided cover for the real extremists. If every single time anyone you disagree with, you just call a bigot Nazi every single time, all you're doing is you're diluting that word. You're just adding water to a very concentrated formula, until it's completely diluted. And then what ends up happening is the actual neo-Nazis and extremists and the actual far right, which these people have never actually, in my opinion, they might have seen on TV, like Richard Spencer, or like that's the extent of the actual neo-Nazis. And that, maybe they saw that interview with Alex Jones and Kanye West where he was praising Hitler
Oh my God.
and stuff like that, which I think was all performative. I believe it was all just performative, and that to increase his brand and that. But like there's the real, hate groups, there's the people that actually do hate, and they're getting ignored. And you're going after someone that says, well, you know what, maybe we shouldn't give 14-year-olds cross-sex hormones. We have no long-term studies on this, and the science around it's pretty shaky overall. And then they're like, hey, you far right bigot, you Nazi, and that. And people are like, well, what do you mean? What do you mean far right bigot? Or even on the topic of immigration, and that, which is a very contentious topic in both the States and in Canada, with left-leaning and right-leaning pundits. And a moderate right-wing take would be something along the lines of, we're not looking for no immigration. We're looking for people to come into our country that have skills and that they can bring to the table, that are going to enhance our country and enhance our economics and that sort of thing. That's more of a center right sort of approach to things. In my opinion, the center left would be, okay, yes, we want people to come in that are going to enhance our economy, but we should also bring in people that are suffering from other countries as well. We should extend some humanitarianism. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing overall either. But then we end up with a situation where you go to the far left and it's open borders. Borders don't exist. Borders are racist. Borders are an old colonial concept invented by white people 1,000 years ago, meant to control different sectors of society. Then you have the far right position, which is we don't need any immigrants. The number needs to be zero. Shut down our borders. We need to nationalize as much as possible. And they're both very scary positions to have, and they don't leave a lot of nuance in that when you have a position like that.
Let me ask you a question. Your media up there, so do they play just to the both far extremes and that's it? Is it every night one side's telling their extreme version and then there's like missing big chunks of the truth on both sides? Is that, because that's what I see here.
I'll put it to you this way. There's currently a petition going on there's currently an ongoing dispute petition in our CRTC, which is oh my God, I can't remember it. Communication, television regulation, something like that. They're the
Okay.
people that regulate like our television content and stuff like that. And right now they have put forward that they want to ban Fox News from Canada. That Fox News is a far right, hateful media organization that has no place on Canadian airwaves. And so they are going to ban Fox News from Canada. You won't be able to get it as part of a cable package or anything like that.
That
Now,
sounds like China.
well, it is. It
The
is.
fuck?
So that is an actual proposal. You can go online right now. I've submitted my comments saying that, we need to not ban things just because we don't agree with them. And the biggest one that they hated, of course, was Tucker Carlson. Well, Tucker Carlson isn't even with Fox News anymore. Ever since he started questioning the Dominion voting machines and all that sort of stuff, they gave him the boot. Fox News is a dying news agency, in my opinion, no better than CNN. I mean, CNN punted Don Lemon the same week that Tucker Carlson went. And Don Lemon's, the reason why they were punted him was because of his sexist behavior towards the staff at CNN and that. And so I was like, if Fox News will get rid of their bread and butter guy, the only reason why people even watch Fox News, I mean, why else do people watch Fox News? Who else has been on there? Well, I don't think Ann Coulter's even on there anymore. Like none of the people that used to have any clout are there. And then you have CNN, which is just, they've taken a purity spiral now where, they got rid of their black gay host and that. And so like they've taken a bit of a purity spiral there. So our media, we have nationalized media in Canada. So we have the CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. They're a government-owned media corporation. They're our largest media corporation. Our federal government subsidizes 90% of our media here. So CTV, they I forget how much money they took, but they take on millions of dollars in subsidy every year to keep afloat. Global News, same thing. They all take on government money. Well, if the government's paying your wages, where's your loyalty going to lie?
Yeah.
And then when a right-leaning politician says we need to defund our nationalized media, do you really think that that's a threat to their jobs? So of course they're going to run smear pieces, and our liberal media has spent a long time fawning over our federal government and providing cover for them. We had a scandal here in Canada, one of many. Jody Wilson-Raybould, she was our attorney general, so like top cop of Canada, right? Like she's the one at the very top. She's the ultimate prosecutor of Canada, basically. Indigenous woman, very, very well-spoken person overall, and a liberal. And what happened is that she would not interfere in an investigation of corruption into SNC-Lavalin, which is a French company that has dipped their hands into liberal politics for years. Like they've done a lot of shady stuff over the years, giving money to Liberal Party candidates and all sorts of crazy stuff. Allegedly, I want to say allegedly because I don't want to get sued, and that's all allegedly. And she refused to play ball with that, so the Prime Minister fired her for it. Now, she took a series of audio recordings without the Prime Minister's knowledge, which is a smart thing to do. I say record everything, film everything. And in one of those interesting ones that she had, conversations that she had, she was told by one of the, this are her words, she was told by one of our Prime Minister's key advisors, oh, don't worry about making this decision. What we'll do is once you make the decision, we'll get a whole bunch of op-eds put into the media saying that what you're doing is right. So if you've ever read Noam Chomsky,
I haven't.
What is manufacturing?
Shameful.
Lifelong leftist, and you haven't read Noam Chomsky?
No, I told you I'm not like real into it. I'm just like been living my life. Yeah.
And so Noam Chomsky had a famous kind of book and movie called Manufacturing Consent, and it was about how the government worked with the media to convince the people that Vietnam was good and CIA death squads in third world countries and that was good and all that. But that's manufacturing consent right there. What you're doing is illegal, but or at the very, I won't say legal. What they wanted her to do was immoral, and it was violating the way we do law and business in Canada. But they were going to get the media to play ball for her and cover for her. So that's not the symbolism of a free and fair country. And if we had any inclination towards freedom, towards justice, towards ethics, then we would have had an election right after that. Our government would have fallen. Our governor general would have declared that an election was to be called, and we would have had an election right afterwards. But that never happened. And there's been worse scandals since then.
I'm curious about the compelled speech issue, having to use pronouns and the laws that have been put into place around that.
So this is a very advanced topic, and I don't want to, I'll try to give the Coles Notes version, try to keep it as succinct as possible.
Okay.
Now, I will tell you personally, preferred pronouns are, in my opinion, have become a religious ritual. And I say that because I believe that gender ideology itself has become a religion. It has all the hallmarks of a religion. Now, I want to say this, I want to preface this very quickly. I have a close family member that joined a legitimate cult, and I've witnessed what cult-like behavior does to people based on having firsthand experience. And this family member did try to get me involved in this cult, and I ran in the other direction, and I tried to bring them with me, but I couldn't, unfortunately. And, I've talked about it on other podcasts before, but it's quite an interesting story. So I just want to say it's this gender ideology thing has become a cult.
That's
Has
what
all
I
the
s- that's what I see, and that's
Mhm.
what I want other people to see, because I felt like until I peaked, I was asleep to this thing. I just completely groomed, completely, and I learned about detransitioners, and my brain was like, wait, what? And then that was kind of it for me. Continue.
Well, prefer pronouns are interesting. Like I said, I consider it a ritual. It's no
Mhm.
it's no different. For being a conservative, I'm pretty agnostic overall. So I'm actually not that religious myself personally. But a ritual implies that you're going to make a sacrifice of some type, and that will bring some type of ethereal sort of gain to you. And so when you are compelled to use personal pronouns on someone, you're affirming something that isn't actually reality. The reality is, although this person before you, is 6'4", muscular with a 9-inch penis, they're wearing a dress and some makeup, and they have their hair long and tied back into a ponytail, and they're telling you, you need to say my pronouns are she, her. And you're like looking and like, you're kind of like, but that isn't reality. And then if you say anything about it, people are like, well, you're rude. You're rude. It's just polite. It's just polite. And you know what? I was a lot more left leaning when I was younger, as many teenagers are. I was in a punk rock band when I was a teenager. Um, and our bass player was a cross dresser, and
Oh,
that
fun.
and so he would cross dress, he would wear women's clothing on stage, which, there's a long history of rock and rollers doing that, going back
Nirvana
to
did
the
that.
yeah like long history of that, cross dressing on stage for effect and for smashing gender norms and that sort of thing. And no one had a problem with that. No one had an issue with it whatsoever, and I still don't. Like, whatever. That although I fell out of contact with all the my old bandmates, and that if he was still wearing a dress these days, that's fine. I don't really care. It's whatever. But if he said, you will call me a woman, I'd have to tell him, listen, you know what? I just can't do it. I can't not acknowledge reality. So, whatever you want to do, that's your business, and that, but at the end of the day, you can't expect me to deny reality. And that includes even people that have gone through the surgeries and that. It's not that people with gender dysphoria, that's an actual medical condition. That's an actual psychological condition. I think it would be terrible to have gender dysphoria. I don't. I'm perfectly
Yeah.
comfortable in my body. I'm comfortable with myself, but I feel for people that look in the mirror and they just want to cry. They just want to smash the mirror because they look at it and they're like, this doesn't match who I am. I feel bad for them. I'm not going to pretend to understand them anymore. I can understand what a schizophrenic goes through when they have a schizophrenic episode, or what a bipolar person goes through when they're in a full depression or a full manic episode. I don't experience those things, and I don't have a point of reference, and I can learn about them. But at the end of the day, I can't participate in that reality because it's not my reality. I can only participate in what reality is presented in front of me. So getting back to compelled speech, I said I was going to keep this short, and here I am
No,
just
that's
ranting.
fine. It's great. You're great.
So, like I said, it's a ritual, and I did participate in it for a very short period of time when it first came out because it was so new. And really, despite what people will tell you or say about me online, I'm actually not a bigot, I'm actually quite accepting of different people because I believe in equality, and I believe that equality means that we can be the most economically prosperous. I don't believe in equity. I got into a big fight with communists before, and they tried telling me that equity was, they used disabled people, and they said, well, equity is when you install a elevator so a person in a wheelchair can get to the 6th floor, and that because they can't take the stairs. And I said, no, that's not equity.
Mm-mm.
That's equality.
Right.
Equity is when you reduce the building to one floor because because this person in a wheelchair can't go up to the 6th floor, so no one can go up to the 6th floor anymore. That's equity. And that doesn't help anyone. Everyone just gets pissed off because they're like, why can't we just have floors in an elevator? And like, hey, Hey, do you live that life of that person in the wheelchair? No. Then shut up, able phobic, whatever buzzword they
Right.
use. So compelled speech, pronouns. When it first came out, I was like, okay, and I was like, whatever, I guess this is just the new thing that I guess people are doing. And so for a while in my email signature at work, I put them in there a couple times, and I was like, but it just doesn't make any sense. I have a masculine name and everyone at work knows who the fuck I am. I don't
Yeah.
understand why I need to do this. It's not like I have like a name that seems really androgynous, and that maybe then but why is that so important? It doesn't matter in the workplace anyways. Like I don't really care if people are male or female. Don't, and I'm not even getting into the pronouns of the they thems, because that's all to me. That just delves deeper into the whole insanity of it. And people know who I am, and if you don't, you're going to know by my voice. And if you still don't know, well, then you can just ask. You just
Yeah.
ask me. And I've done it before. Like I knew this woman at a previous workplace, and this way before all the pronoun stuff came out and all that. And I accidentally, when I first met her, I said, "Oh, it's good to meet you, sir," or something like that. And she's like, "No, I'm a woman." And I said, "Okay, my apologies." There we go. Like I didn't need to announce. She didn't need to say, "Oh, my name is Stephanie and my pronouns are she, her," or whatever. It was a simple mistake, and it was quickly rectified, and never. But I would have been
And that's
even.
how it's always worked. That's just
Yeah,
how it's always worked. Why do we have to change it?
we have to change it because you have to participate in the religious ritual. Remember, it's a religious ritual. Now we have a situation where Bill C-16 came into effect in Canada. People like Professor Gad Sad, Professor Dr. Jordan Peterson testified saying that compelled speech will follow these types of things, because they codified into our laws that gender identity is an innate characteristic, no different than race, no different than sex. And it's interesting because sex and gender identity are two different innate characteristics within the same human rights code in Canada. And yeah, it's and he called it
But
years ago.
if that's the case, then why does the gender identity get to change whenever the fuck it feels like it?
Because, well, I don't participate in their
Just
rules.
right.
So I just want to preface this. I mean, I can try to give a good explanation based on what I've seen, but I just want to say, like, that's their rules, and I'll hold
Right.
them accountable to their rules. And when they tell me, "Hey, you're holding me to this, but you're not practicing it," I tell them, "Well, I don't care about your rules. You do." When they try to instill their rules onto me, I just ignore it, or I just tell them, like, I don't have to play by your rules. And I've had people say, "Well, you have to play by this or you're going to get sued. I'm going to find out where you work. I'm going to get you fired. You're going to get sued." And I said, well, okay, well, if that's what happens, that's what happens. I have to accept that freedom of speech comes with consequences for that speech, even if I completely disagree that the consequences are ridiculous. But what's happened is that ever since Bill C-16 passed, Canada, and it's not just Bill C-16, there's been other ones as well, but Canada has been on a major downhill slope culturally. And of course, we all know what happens in culture moves to politics and moves to other aspects of people's lives. And so after Bill C-16, we had people like Jessica Yaniv, and that, who was another person from our California, from British Columbia, who went to a spa and demanded to have his lady parts waxed, and was informed that they don't wax balls and penises there. He brought the company to the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal, said that they were not affirming the gender identity, and I'm not sure if he won any money or not, but he was one of the big cases, and it's just spiraled from there with other cases. um, Heather Mason, she's a former prisoner in Canada that was living at a female facility, and she's taken to the streets now and made it her life's work to talk about that they are putting intact males into female prisons in Canada. And so all these laws and policies that, because it all focuses on, this is a very fringe topic, and there for years has been policies in place, in these institutions and these private sector areas to deal with fringe cases. And these are not new issues, but with the Bill C-16 and gender identity becoming an innate characteristic, it is spiraled out of control. And the problem is that if you are a true progressive leftist, then you can never draw a line in the sand. This is the downfall of their ideology. Progressivism means you can never draw a line in the sand. You can only continue to progress, which means that it goes from progressing from issues that are of major concern, for example, equal rights for women, Indigenous rights in Canada, things like that, which are areas that definitely needed to be explored and we needed to clarify things, and we needed to find a way to be equal and to ensure equal rights. But as progressives, once the big issues were won, and rightly so in many regards, well, you can't stop being progressive. So it's just spiraled downwards in this downwards loop. And what's happened now is we're getting into things like right now in schools, I believe it's Ontario, teachers have been instructed now that when they meet a new child, until they ask the child and ascertain the child's pronouns, they will. This isn't you may, you should, you could, you will refer to the child using they them pronouns because you don't know their gender yet. And this
What happens if you don't?
Well, you're fired. You become like Chantel. I can never say her last name properly. She was a teacher. You're fired. Shannon Boschski, and that he got fired. I think you become like Nurse Amy Ham, and that in BC, and you're fired from being a nurse because
and this starts at kindergarten.
Yes. So now their curriculum well, the government would prefer if it started before kindergarten.
Right.
Pretty much they would prefer if it started when the child's still in the womb, and that by not having gender reveal parties and things like that, and not assigning a gender and letting the child choose their gender and teaching them to, from the time they're babies, not to do that. That is the push, and it is a hard push. And you know why? Is because this all started in the universities. But by the time someone gets to university, they've already established they've established their worldview, and people will change their political opinions, they'll clarify their stances, but it's very, very hard to instill new values and new ideas that radically deviating from the societal norm, the habitus of society. It's very difficult to do that when they reach university. So then they started pushing on the colleges and the trade schools and that. Then they got a lot of pushback because tradespeople don't care about that sort of stuff. They're just out there to do their jobs, right? They're manual labor jobs. And they're like, oh man, the tradespeople are fighting back, but we got most of the, social science people on board with this. But even the universities, the evolutionary psychologists we don't have on board, and some of the, stuff we don't, but we've got a decent chunk, but it's not enough. It's not enough and this is going to tie back to the idea of communism and that, but for the glorious revolution to occur, we need to start younger. So then they started really going towards the high schools, and in the high schools, they started really pushing like the gay straight alliance stuff. So which again, I'm not a fan of overall, but I don't think that's necessarily the deal breaker, and that because although I think that that's still a form of indoctrination, I also believe too that high school is when a lot of teenagers that are gay and lesbian and that they start to come out of the closet and stuff like that, right?
And they need support.
Sure.
Yeah.
And maybe they don't have the most supportive homes and that sort of thing, but that doesn't mean that the school has the right to hide stuff from the parents either.
It's changed over the years. I mean, I don't know if they were hiding things back in the day, but I feel like
they were.
Okay. Well, yeah. So the Gay Straight Alliance is created, for this safe space, but now it's feeling a lot more indoctrinating because it's not just this one group among many. It's all over the school, plastered everywhere, flags in the curriculum, in the language, constantly reinforced.
That's the religious symbology of the cult. The flag is the new gender, the progressive pride flag is their cross. That is the progressive gender ideological cross. No different than the Christian cross. They live for that flag. The traditional, they call it the traditional pride flag now. So I guess if you have just the rainbow flag, you're conservative now because that's traditional now. But remember, the Overton window is shifted, right? We're talking, what's been center and left and right is shifted. It's going to look the opposite on my screen here, but it's shifted far to the left is what is normal and acceptable, and then what becomes more right wing. And so, in my opinion,
I was accused. I jumped into I didn't know it was a rad fem space when I jumped into it. I'm new to Twitter Spaces, which by gosh, I love it so much. It's so much fun.
Can be, definitely.
It can be, right? If you're in the wrong space. So I got into this space and I actually was crying during it because it was so fucking scary. And I needed a 5-hour nap after. That was my first introduction. Now I forgot why I brought it up. I forgot. Just keep going. I'm so sorry. It'll come back to me.
Well, it's all good, but here's the problem now. Intersectionality has played a key factor in a lot of what's happened, because before it was like, okay, well, you're gay, lesbian, you're going to go through some tough times, maybe a little bit tougher than other people, because yes, I mean, the normal is a straight couple. That's the normal.
I remembered what it was. I'm so sorry.
Go ahead.
I was accused of being right wing in that space and grilled. Why were you watching Tucker Carlson? Why were you watching Megyn Kelly? And I had already explained I've been watching everything since I left the party because I've been noticing gaps and lies. And so now I watch everything. But it was like, yeah, you're right wing and we don't want you here. I'm like, dude, I'm here to fight for the thing that you're fighting for. And I'm just trying to learn some stuff. Like, what do you do? Well, anyway, for me to be called right wing of all people on earth is insane. Anyway, please continue.
Well, the radical feminists, it's so interesting because they've really eaten their own over the years. And that because if you were to look at like second wave feminism type things, I think that drew a lot of political people together from different spectrums of the political scale, where they said, okay, we're going to disagree on 90% of things, but this 10% thing that we're going to agree on is something that's going to draw us and bind us enough together. Like, as my friend Stuart Parker would say, it became like a big tent political sphere where people that normally wouldn't hang out were hanging out for a cause that meant something. We're seeing that now, even with all this gender stuff. But the rad femmes and that, I feel bad for them. I feel bad for them because, like any other group, you get a couple bad ones that spoil the bunch for everyone else. Like the rad femmes peaked, in my opinion, when there was the one radical feminist. I remember she wrote an article that all penis and vagina sex was rape.
Oh,
any penetration was rape because the woman was being penetrated, and being penetrated was the ultimate form of humiliation for a woman or something like that. Like, I read it a few years ago and I thought, this is peak rad femme. Like,
I had to Google what rad femme was after I got out of that space. I mean, I knew nothing, and I'm in there and these women are fucking dogpiling on Kelly J. Keene. You know who she is?
Mm-hmm.
They're dogpiling on her. She's in the space and I'm just like, wow, what's happening? And it was like, no matter what anyone was doing to fight this same cause, it wasn't the right way.
Mm-hmm.
No, you're not doing it right. No, those aren't the right people. No, those people are Nazis. No, don't do it. And I'm like, I'm just trying to help.
Well, the right wing sphere and even the left wing sphere, to a degree, they've really reached a problem here, because in Canada, we've had a big split in the right here in Canada. I won't get into it because it's a lot of Canadian politics, and Americans will get quite bored with it because our political stuff is generally quite not as cool as the stuff in the States. We don't got no Donald Trumps in Canada.
It's not sexy.
No, it's quite bland. And that But basically we had a prime minister, Stephen Harper. He ran Canada for a number of years, very fiscal conservative, would not let his members speak on social issues. But then culture became more important than fiscal. He left office. He lost his seat. The Conservatives lost the election to Liberals. And then all the conservative leaders after that were from his inner circle, well, they didn't know how to talk about social issues. So they've just bombed it. And that's created this big divide in the right. We had the PPC, which is, they call themselves the real right-wing party. And that in Canada, the Conservative Party is just the softer liberals. And that like just, and the problem is in the conservative spheres, the reason why conservatives keep losing in Canada and why we can't get the radicals out of office and we've allowed them to basically run rampant is conservatives spend too much time fighting each other over here. I mean, I saw it with Donald Trump in the States. The guy basically surrounded himself with morons and people that backstabbed him in every direction because he wasn't a career politician. So he didn't have any connections or anything like that he could leverage like a career politician would. And his party whip sucked as well. But anyways, it just, we have this thing where the conservatives in Canada, everyone wants their brand of conservatism to be the right one. So for example, I'm not very religious. I have nothing against Christianity. I have nothing against, most religions in general. I mean, I was born Catholic, raised Catholic. I guess I'm still Catholic overall, and that with my value system. But at the end of the day, I'm not really a practicing a religious anyone. But then I have these people on the religious right, and they're going on, they're quoting Bible verses, and they're saying, this is conservatism. Our religious stuff is the conservatism. And then I have people that are more, fiscally conservative, but socially, I guess, more liberal, I guess.
Let me ask you a question. As far as conservatism goes, has there always been a religious element, or is that something new that's been added to sort of gain more power?
There always has been a religious element to Canadian conservatism. It's baked right into their the Conservative Party of Canada's documents. So for example, the Conservative Party of Canada, in their documents, in their official constitution, it says that they oppose sex selective abortion. So that, while that is a moral stance that you can take, it's also tied in a bit with religiosity as well, the abortion debate, and that, which I won't get into here because it's not what we're here to talk about today. So there always has been a bit of a religious leaning to it, but there's been a definite resurgence in it. In my opinion, the resurgence of this religiosity into conservative politics isn't necessarily 100% organic in Canada. I do believe that there is big money behind it, big religious money in the background that's pushing this. No different than in the States with they talk about big conservative and that when it comes to their media pundits like Matt Walsh and Ben Shapiro and that there's big religious, big money behind it. I don't know. I don't follow it that much. And then within the GOP and that you have different special interest groups and their money that's driving, behind the scenes, right? And their lobbyists and that. And the left has theirs as well. But to tie this all back into compelled speech and that, because I know we've kind of gone a little off topic here, it is now codified into several educational institutions in Canada. Like I said before, that children will be referred to when they arrive in the schools, employees that you don't know their pronouns in the workplace, you're supposed to use they, them until they tell you their pronouns. Remember, pronouns can change at any time. So today I'm feeling like a he, they, and tomorrow I'm feeling like a they, her, or whatever. And in my opinion, this is it's a recipe for disaster. This is an HR witch hunt. It's a bureaucratical nightmare. There's no way to truly enforce it. And all it's going to do, like so many of this shit ever does, is it just pisses people off and it doesn't bring people together. This is not about bringing people together.
No.
This is not about, singing what is it, like a Beatles song and everyone holding hands and drinking Pepsi bullshit. Although the corporations are fully on board with this, the corporations are the worst part of all this because they have hopped on this Like I use, for example, like my bank. My bank right now is just gayed the fuck up right now. Now I'm gonna preface this by saying that
I wish I was really good at like GarageBand so I could just take that and make a dance song out of it. Someone please do that. Go on. Sorry.
like they got the rainbows in their logos, rainbow everything. They celebrated the first day of Pride Month and that, and or Pride season. Sorry, Pride season in Canada. It's a season. And you know what? Okay, you're a private corporation. You can do whatever the hell you want. If you want to have rainbow shit, you can do that every single day. But I was thinking, because like I'm in a same-sex relationship and that I have a husband and that, and I asked
I
my
didn't
husband.
know that.
I don't put it out there, not because I'm ashamed or anything, but again, what is it? It has very little
It has
to do
nothing to
with,
do with fucking anything. Why? Yeah.
it's just,
Anyway.
it's just my life and that. And so I asked my husband there, I said to him, I said, well, the bank here, it's got all these rainbows. I think I should go in. Maybe they give like a special gay discount or something like that. So I did that. I phoned the bank and I said, hey, I see you're celebrating Pride season here, and I am a gay man in a committed gay relationship, and I'd like to know what special offers you have for me. And they're like, well, what do you mean? Well, you're celebrating Pride Month and that, so you're acknowledging that something's unequal and that. So sell me something at a really good price, and that at a gay price.
Let's get some reparations going.
Yeah, well, might as well. Like, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? So at the end of the day, they tried to sell me some stuff, but none of it at a gay discount. So I was like,
Oh,
well, so much for the global homo agenda that the right says is existing, and that the far right says
you were
exists.
robbed. You
I
were
know
robbed.
I was. It was incredibly disappointing experience. I made sure when I did my exit survey, I indicated that, when they said they were celebrating Pride, month, that I was entitled to some form of extra discount because of who I slept with and that. But apparently that wasn't the case. They're just, I was quite disappointed.
Now, if someone used that language at an elementary school, that would really shine a light on the fucking absurdity, because little baby children in kindergarten don't need to have any kind of gay pride because they shouldn't be like doing sex.
Well,
I'm
and
just
it's not,
saying.
well,
You can have pride. Who are you sleeping with for nap time, Maggie? Like, the fuck?
Well, and that's what it comes down to. Really, at the end of the day, even most conservatives out there, when there was the one gay pride day in Canada, it was one day, it was usually a Friday. So all the gays would take the day off on Friday, and they go to the parade, they party it up, and then they go have unprotected sex and that with multiple partners and contract, all sorts of bad diseases. And I'm not trying to be rude or anything like that, but it is a stereotype, and it's a stereotype for a reason. And that gay men are thought to be more promiscuous, and there's evidence to show that it's quite often the case. And that,
I
um,
have heard some wild stories because, you know, I know a lot of gay people.
well, and what's really sad is over the years, the gay community has allowed predators into their communities. And I hate to and I hate to say that, but it's the truth. And it's really sad because, if I think at the end of the day, why does the left want children to know all about pride and all that? Now, if they had added a, a chapter or a couple of paragraphs saying to their curriculum, saying that, this is how grade five is when we learned all about how babies were made and all that sort of stuff. This is years ago. And even then, when you're in grade five, you don't really fucking know what the hell is going on. You're learning about it. You're like, oh, okay, well, that, I guess when you're a kid, you just, okay. And the teacher uses very basic language, and and the
And
note
it's
goes
that
home.
horrible, embarrassing like slice
Well,
of a
yeah, like,
human where you can see the innards and the dongs just hanging there.
yeah.
It's not fun.
Well, and it is a little embarrassing. Like, people were embarrassed because, like, you're talking about, like, you're
Totally.
talking about privates and stuff like that, right? And the teacher, she used very plain language, and And then of course the note went home with the parents to advise the parents as well that we're entering into the part of the curriculum where we talk about reproductive. Your child may have additional questions and that. So like that was the school teaching about that. I don't think most people would care if they had put in even a paragraph saying that this is how most people love each other and that, but there is people have different, I don't know, like I
I
don't
think
know
it was
how.
kind of like probably in the 90s, it was like maybe Billy had two moms. And so when Billy was in that class, there would be a whole talk about Billy and his two moms and like
Yeah,
everybody lived and it was great.
yeah,
That's how
like,
we were already. I'm Gen X. I don't know how old you are, but it's
well,
just like,
I'm on the millennial sphere and that, but it's like at the end of the day I don't think anyone would care about something like that, but and that's all that needs to be put in there. And then as the curriculum expands, people get into high school and that, then they can talk a little bit more and they can say, that's when they can say, like if, and I'm pretty sure like it's going back some time now. I'm pretty sure when I was in high school, they did have a small section there just where explain that if you were, because we had to do like in grade 9, you have to do the whole thing on STDs and all that. And they show you all the lovely pictures and you're like, holy fuck, like I don't want that. Oh yeah, we had to do that in high school. It was
I
part of
don't
our
remember if we had that.
it was
Clearly, if
part
we did, it didn't scar me enough.
it was part of our healthy living class, and we learned all about drugs, and then they showed you pictures of like meth addicts and like the final stages before they die, and you're like, whoa, I'm not gonna do stuff like that. And they show you like people's arms rotting off. I'm pretty sure they played like a clip from that movie Requiem for a Dream,
I
and that
knew
were
you were going to say that.
and that where like the guy's arm is just rotted off from all the dirty needle use and that. And then we did a section 2 in high school, I remember, and it was on STDs. And I remember there was some statistics that were pointed out saying that if people that engage in same sex in relationships are at higher risk of things like HIV and AIDS and that. And again, it was non-political. It was just, here's what I have to tell you, and you're going to take that how you're going to take that, right? And so why did we have to expand on that? Why did that have to go away for this new thing? Well, it's all because of gender identity. That's where it all went. And I'm going to say this here, and I don't have any proof of it per se. So it's a theory. I have a theory that the far left made a Faustian deal with the pedophiles, where is because for the far left, the idea of innocence, childhood innocence, needs to be shattered, because not everyone has a childhood that has childhood innocence and wonder and all that. So no one can have it. Everyone has to have those illusions shattered as soon as possible. And so I had this idea that an element of the far left made a Faustian deal with the pedophiles, where they basically said, we'll let you shatter the innocence of children as long as they get to be part of our red guard, as long as they get to be nice little revolutionaries. Now, I mean, that's quite a theory to have. But because like
And by revolutionaries, you mean the Marxist utopia that's trying to
yeah,
be ushered in? I'm
yeah,
so
like,
sorry, audience. I know that this is not the Melissa that you remember from a year ago. I'm so sorry. Please continue.
but and again, like on paper, all these things seem really good, Marxism and communism. But if you would talk to if you would talk to a traditional Marxist, so like I'm talking like an early workers revolutionary class Marxist, they would tell you that talking about gay people and gay people in general are a bourgeoisie distraction from working class rallying. That was the
Hmm.
early thing. Gay issues were believed to be a bourgeoisie upper class issue that was meant to distract from working class solidarity. And
Interesting.
now, how has Marxism fallen from that? I'll tell you, it's definitely taken a leap from there. And that's why it's neo-Marxism now. But the traditional communists, that's why you see trad communists and that, and they don't buy into any of this gender stuff. They don't.
Will you explain what trad is? Because I literally
Oh,
only
okay.
learned it like a couple days ago, and I know that no one listening on my side is going to know what you're talking about.
Trad is like, it's just slang for traditional.
But like
So
trad TikTok is young girls that are 22 wearing homestead dresses and talking about baking for their husbands all day and being
and so
submissive.
yeah, and like so trad wives is a big trend on TikTok. In my opinion, it's a LARP for the most
Right.
part.
Yeah.
You know, live action role play and that they're LARPing. But there is maybe some, like I knew this one lady, and she found her traditional Orthodox husband, and they have like 8 kids, and he works at a pretty high paying job, and she literally just homesteads, and she loves it. She loves it. That's
It
her
fucking
thing.
sounds great. I got to be honest. If you have the right setup, it sounds amazing.
Yeah, like they're like she's happy with it, and she's so against all the feminist stuff and that, and she's like, you know, all these women tell me I'm oppressed. I've never been freer and all that sort of stuff. But I'm gonna sell you, your audience, something here though. And it's
Yep.
not, I'm not trying to sell traditional trad wives or anything like that, but I will say this. People have this idea that trad wives was like the handmaiden's tale. The woman was kept chained at home to a kitchen table where she slaved away while her husband, after he was done a long day at work, went to local club and threw, which had male only membership, and threw back a couple of beers with the boys, watched the baseball game while she was barefoot at home. And he came home, and like he basically beat the shit out of her and drank, and then would had 10 seconds of horrible sex with her, and that where he basically raped her, and then she was stuck pregnant again. And that's the idea that was sold to people. But
I have to say that I know someone who had that life, and she's related to me, and she's my grandmother. Continue.
and in some cases, sure, that did happen in some cases. But you look at a lot of the you look at some of the movies that talk about those times, and their honest depictions of it. Women had power, but it was a much different power base than women have power now. It was behind the scenes power. It wasn't upfront power like it is now. And I'll use it for an example. Yes, these women were traditionally, their male counterparts would go to work, but a lot of the times they were the ones in the communities organizing. So they got together, they had women's groups where they organized things. Much to the I will admit, much of the time was to their husband's benefit, socially and politically in the spheres. But like they were, a lot of women in that were part of groups that were like nonprofits and that, and they were raising funds and awareness for different issues and stuff like that. What was that movie I watched, The Help, and that
Mm-hmm.
take all the real life racist stuff out of there, and you had women that were generally subservient to their husbands, but they were still community organizers. They're still going to community things and raising funds and being part of, like, you know, women's groups and things like that. They had power, but it wasn't power like they have currently. It was a different type of power. It wasn't a in your face, power. It was much more behind the scenes where, you know, if your husband wanted that job, then it meant that your wife had to go hang around with that person's wife, and they would hold like a tea party or something like
And that
that. And
still happens. I worked for a very wealthy family, and the wife had to do her. She didn't have a
Mhm.
job, but she had a job,
Oh
and
yeah.
I watched her do it.
Well, it's still part of the US system, because as soon as president takes office, the first lady has to have a mandate. Michelle Obama's was clean eating. What's in Trump's Melania Trump's one was cyberbullying. So
Don't
so
act
so
like my husband.
yeah, like why am I here? How the hell did this happen? Why am I in the White House type thing?
Yeah.
But jokes aside, it was a different type of power. And so, you know, they would get together and they would have their tea party, or they would, you know, whatever they did together. And then afterwards, you know, the wife would go back to her husband and say, hey, you know what, I was meeting with her and I heard a little bit more, and you know what, I think that guy's a swell guy in that, and you know, maybe we need to be more involved with them. So then he would call them up and say, okay, well, you got the job, right? And so they have power, but it wasn't, I'm not, I guess, educated enough to know what you would
Well,
call that type of power.
and that's a certain class of people having that kind of power. People like my grandmother and her peers. You're not talking about them really, because if you have 9 kids, I don't think you're going to any fucking town meetings.
No.
But anyway, but I know what you're talking about, a certain class of people where the men are making deals and doing their thing, and those women in particular were part of the structure of what was going on
100%.
there.
100%. Well, yeah, I'm not selling to you that it was all good either. That
You're right.
I won't sit here and try to blow hot air around and lie to people here. There was plenty of women, and still to this day, there's plenty of women around the world that are subjected to any conditions that would make our worst day look like our best day.
Yes, and I often think of them, like when I'm having a bad day. I'm like, oh God, my village isn't being bombed, so buck up, little Gipper.
Yeah. But yeah, it's politically, it's a mess in Canada.
Did you finish, because we went so far around and I'm so sorry. Did you finish talking about the compelled speech? Did you wrap that up as far as the law goes?
As far as the law goes, we're still evolving our laws here.
Okay.
This thing of this they them codified in, it's not codified into the law thing. It's codified into individual private and public corporations, institutions now, but that's just the beginning. I highly anticipate we're going to see lawfare pull down on this. Lawfare is when people use the legal system to punish other people, not to get justice. And I can see lawfare being used in a lot of cases now that this has happened, where, I come into work today. Well, my boss didn't ask me what my pronouns were today and then called me a she, but actually today I don't feel like a man or a woman. I'm a they. And
God,
the problem is Canada's biggest problem is and again, I won't go down too far of a rabbit hole here, because I'm sure your audience doesn't want to listen to the history of Confederation in Canada, but the Charter of Rights and Freedoms is a radically different than your constitutional rights.
And is that sort of like your equivalent of our Constitution? Because I was going to ask you about that.
Our charter is like a toddler's crayon drawing version of your Constitution.
Well, that sounds reassuring. Considering our Constitution is the only thing holding us together, and barely by a fucking thread at this point.
Well, and moving past all the abuses and restructurings of the U.S. Constitution, your Constitution guarantees you a right of freedom of speech. Ours doesn't. Ours says that you have the right to freedom of speech, except for what is limited by law.
See, I don't think that most people know that, because I didn't know that. And that's why I wanted to have you on, because I'm like, wait, Canada? I don't know nothing about Canada. That's crazy sauce.
That is our first constitutional right, is our freedom of speech. And that, well, it's not technically the first, but it's right in there with the top ones. There's a freedom of speech, except where limited by necessity of law. Well, what the fuck is necessity of law? That's whatever the fucking government says is the necessity of the law. And over the pandemic and COVID, and sorry, I use those words and that, but over all that, we learned that the government, because I had friends of mine and I thought they were smart people, and they're like, well, the law says you can't do this. And I'm like, yeah, but for a long time in Canada, law said that if you engage in sodomy, you would go to prison for however many years. The law said all sorts of crazy things. Was it morally justified then? So you're telling me the law is the moral justification? The law is written generally by a bunch of upper middle class to upper class people. They write the laws in this country. So are we just basically saying that your wealth equals morality? The more wealthy you are, obviously, the more morally sound you are. It's a line of bullshit. And the COVID exposed to me that people are fully willing to engage in cognitive dissonance. Well, it's the law. The law says you can't talk about it. The law says this, the law says that. Just because the law says anything doesn't mean that it's necessarily right. The government could pass it. And I see it. We had the Freedom Convoy in Canada, and when they thought that it was going to come back again, there was
What
like
was that? Tell me, what's the Freedom Convoy?
the Freedom Convoy was just over a year ago, all with all the COVID mandates and that were in place. Our prime minister basically said that people that refused to get vaccinated were racist, and they were part of a fringe minority of racist conspiracy theorists, and it angered people enough that about 2,000 people descended on Ottawa and blocked Parliament, blocked the streets. And of course, these aren't professional protest organizers like Antifa or any of those people like Occupy Wall Street or whatever. So they didn't know what to do once they had the streets all blocked off. So they just threw a big party. They threw like a tailgate party in true Canadian fashion. They just threw a huge ass party for like 2 weeks. The prime minister of our country declared the Emergency Measures Act, which has not been declared since World War II. It basically suspends everyone's rights and allows the government to suspend people's rights. It's funny because they'll say, no, your rights are still protected. That's a lie. That's complete bullshit. Anyone that says that's a propagandist and a liar. It suspended people's rights. They called in our national police force, our RCMP, which is the equivalent to your FBI, came in with emergency response teams and started beating people in the streets and towing vehicles and that. So the city of Ottawa, which is our nation's capital, there was like a post convoy boom where some people thought about going back to Ottawa again. They were going to travel back. But it was a much smaller number. So the city of Ottawa made the fine for honking your horn, because the big thing about the Freedom Convoy is like just truck horns honking 24/7, right? So city of Ottawa increased the fine for honking your horn and creating a public disturbance of it, which is a bylaw. I think they increased the fine to $10,000. So what we have in this country when we pass laws now is we just say, okay, well, we'll just add more monetary value. In my opinion, they might as well just make the fine $1 million.
Right.
Why not make it $10 million? Why not make it $1 trillion? It's so meaningless. You taken something that was like I think it was like a $500 fine, and they turn into like a $10,000 fine. And I thought, this is just lawfare. It's an abuse that unfortunately people will say, well, it's a law. It's a law. They can up the fines. It's a law. And I'm like, just lick the boot any harder and you're going to rip the polish right off.
Let me ask you a question. In that situation, when they were causing a ruckus for what, 2 weeks, you said?
Yeah, about 2 weeks and a little bit longer.
And they were affecting traffic and
Affected traffic,
things like that.
But they weren't
Businesses.
violent. They weren't violent.
Right.
There
What should have happened in that case? I'm not
When
saying that I'm backing, but I'm just saying, like, in my thought is anyone who's like, well, you can't have people acting fucking insane out in the street for 2 weeks, which, that's true as well. So what's the right thing to do there?
The best thing that could have happen, in my opinion, was the government could have appointed an arbitrator, a mediation team, emergency mediation team, and gone out there and mediated with the group, maybe done a public apology and said, listen, when I said those things on television, maybe I was being a little bit too crass. So maybe a bit of a public apology, a little bit of crow, because he did say some pretty raunchy things about the anti-vaxxers and that sort of stuff. And then maybe even just have MPs go out there and just meet with people, meet with Canadians, meet with the fucking people that elected you to your fucking office. We're not a fiefdom here. And that, go out there and just meet with them. And yeah, they're going to be angry. Yeah, they're going to yell at you. Yeah, you might get called names. You might get, the people with their live streamers are going to look for their gotcha moments where you say something wrong. Whatever. Whatever. Get out there and just meet with people, talk with people, hear what they have to say, and then make changes.
Right.
If they had done that, yeah, do your job basically. And if they had done that, I think it would have brought the temperature down way more. I think they could have negotiated some different things, and it could have ended without the need to have violent police intervention.
Great.
I think that could have been done in a much different fashion, peacefully. Now, were there bad actors in the convoy? Sure, there were. There were people that were just there. They're like the jokers of the world. They just want to watch the world burn.
Yeah.
And that they're like the Um, I forget his name, from the first season of Fargo, the guy that was just going around creating chaos everywhere he went.
Oh, I watched it a while ago. I don't know.
Yeah, like I forget what his name was, but like, like just chaos agents and that. Yeah, sure, there were a couple of those, but I'll tell you, if the government had done that, those people would have been outed pretty quick for what they actually stood for, which isn't actually Canadian values and freedom. They're just there for themselves, and they would have been cast off to the side pretty quick.
All right.
But our going back to our charter of rights doesn't guarantee freedom of speech. And when the charter was conceived, in my opinion, that was a big oversight. And because of that, our government has encroached more and more onto our speech, and now compelled speech. And we're, like I said, we're in a purity spiral. And what we did, and I'm actually reading more about this because I'm reading a book called The Court Party right now, about how we basically turned over all the power out of the governments to the court systems in Canada. And the court systems are radically left. They're led by judges that live in $1 million homes outside of the violent, dangerous cities that they preside over for justice and that. And yeah, our they've given it over to the judiciary here completely. So like people, like our government will pass a law, and then a judge will just say, no, I don't agree with that, or he'll make a ruling on it, and it goes into case law, and now it changes the context of what that is.
And how do those judges get in there? Is it the same way like the prime minister appoints? No.
Well, the prime
'Cause
minister
here, the
doesn't.
president,
No, all the judges are chosen within their different law societies. They have internal
Okay.
elections and stuff like that. So the public has no input into the type of judiciary that we end up with. And the leftists recognized that years ago, and that's why they maneuvered certain people into certain positions. And now we have what we consider like our woke court system in Canada.
Interesting.
So we don't actually have equality of law in Canada. And this is a very complicated subject, and I'm only going to preface and touch on it. So in Canada, because of the history of colonization of Indigenous people in Canada, we have a court system where I commit an armed robbery as a white person. So my skin color affects what type of sentence I'm going to get in Canada.
Mm.
As a white person, I don't get any additional thoughts or considerations behind why I did what I did and all that. If you're Indigenous in Canada and you go in front of a judge, they have to do something what's called a Gladue report. And so when the judge does sentencing, and in his consideration, he has to consider the fact that you're Indigenous and the history of bad stuff that's happened to Indigenous people, and that has to be factored into the sentencing. So
That's racist.
Well, it's not a blind system. It's not a blind just system. It's a two-tier just system. But now we're running into something very interesting. After George Floyd and everything that happened there, we're now seeing more and more things where judges are now considering ethnocultural reports. So now if you are, let's say, Black, and you go to in front of the judiciary, they want to talk about how systemic racism has affected your life. And that factors into their sentencing.
Wow.
And that's Canada. That's our justice system. That's justice in 2023. And that. So, but I mean, that's part of a whole other topic we could get into, but that's what I mean when I say we've handed so much judiciary power over to these woke authoritarian weirdos that just want to control our lives. They think the government needs to be involved in every decision of our lives, that the government deserves a place in our homes, no different than the television that you can never shut off in 1984. And that they just feel that this is an entitlement. The government needs to be part of our lives, and that more government is always better.
Speaking of 1984, I follow someone on Twitter who just graduated from high school, and it was not part of her curriculum. She's an American, I believe, but
Okay.
What the fuck? Did you guys have to read 1984 when you were in high school?
We read 1984 when I was in high school. Most people read it because it was part of the curriculum.
Yeah.
I devoured that book. I'm a big reader. I like reading. That book was one of the most terrifying books I ever read. I remember at the end of the book, the first time I ever read it, at the end of the book, I actually cried.
Wow.
And that because I realized when you're stuck in that type of system, you can never escape. It's hopeless. There's no hope. Hope is gone. And
There's no reason to live.
well, there isn't. There isn't in that world, there is no reason to live. Well, for the people that are older, for the children, there is, because the children don't know any better. So the children think it's normal. And this is what I mean, tying 1984
Mhm.
back to what's going on with the grade schools and that in 1984, all children were informers. They never knew the world before the war, before the disease and everything like that. They only knew the party. The party was always right. And they would on public transit, they would sing party songs, very militaristic songs. They wore what looked like, in the movie and that they wore kind of what looked like Boy Scout uniforms, but they were party uniforms, very similar to the Hitler Youth
Mhm.
and that. Um, and they sang patriotic songs and they were always informing on people. They were because no adult could be trusted. And that goes back to the far left with the Maoists and the Red Guard and that sort of thing. And it's terrifying to think because those children, for the adults, they would kill themselves because they realize this isn't normal. There's a whole other world out there. The children, though, that to them that's normal, that this world's great, everything's fine, this is the epitome of civilization. And what do you think's happening in the grade schools now?
Right.
And
Right.
it's going to
That's what
go,
scares me.
but the
That's
thing
why
is,
I asked, because I don't think they're teaching it anymore. And is that a conscious decision not to teach 1984 so people don't see
well,
what's happening to
1984,
themselves while it's happening?
well, Mel, 1984 was written by a white person, so we need to decolonize our bookshelves.
Oh, that's right. I
And
forgot.
that so we need to make sure that we are including different sources, and we need to make sure that they're intersectional. So instead of reading 1984, maybe they could read genderqueer instead and learn about someone's sexual abuse they went through as a child that they are portraying out onto paper. And that, the book Genderqueer, I feel like it's an awful book. It should not be available for children. But what makes it so awful is that it talks about someone's history of being sexually abused. And I don't think that I think that there's a place to talk about that, but not in a place where you're trying to make it better for yourself by making it into a kid's book.
Mm-mm.
But even worse than
Can I
1984,
ask you about that book? So is that a book that's in schools in Canada?
it's in schools in Canada, it's in schools in the States. It's
That's what
just
I
one of
thought.
of books that's been introduced by um and it's interesting because I'm not about book banning. I'm really not. I don't think the book should be banned. I don't think it's appropriate for children.
Right.
I don't. Um, just like I read Bret Easton Ellis's American Psycho.
Mhm.
Brilliant book. In my opinion, it's one of the best books to ever describe the decay that happens with hypercapitalism. And mix that with sociopathy and that sort of thing. I think it's a brilliant book. Most of Bret Easton Ellis's stuff is brilliant for such a nihilistic view. I would never recommend that book for children. Never, never. It would be an awful book to ever have a child read.
Yeah.
And but even on the topic of books, there's another book. 1984 is that's the staple, right? People read 1984 and they're like, there's the totalitarianism and that. And I told him, I said, if you're going to read 1984, there's two other books you need to read. You need to read Animal Farm
Mhm.
as well, so you get a context behind the steps that leads to 1984, that leads to that totalitarianism in our class-based society. But then you need to read Brave New World.
So
That
are
book,
they not putting any of those in school anymore? Have they all been cut?
I
Because
don't
I
know.
had that was the trifecta. I mean, that's what I did senior year of high school. Those were what I read.
I'm not sure if they ban them from schools. I think they're still part of some curriculums, but quite often now they've moved on to different books and that sort of thing. Now, what's interesting is they still quite often in late high school. I do believe. I mean, I haven't been in high school in years and that, but I do believe that they still in some areas teach Handmaid's Tale. But that's a book that leftists like, though, because, listen, we need to keep the religious right in check, or else literally they're gonna keep you, you're gonna be pregnant and barefoot, and you'll have to bear children whether you like it or not. And I mean, that's definitely a worry that could possibly happen. But the thing is, there is no hyper religious societies anymore. This whole thing of Christian nationalism is going to come, and they're going to seize power, and they're going to instill some sort of Christo-fascist thing. There's way too much diversity overall now for that to ever happen. There's
I
way
hope
too
you're
much.
right about that, because that does feel like a real thing to me. But is that just like, am I being brainwashed, propagandized to be afraid of that? Was that?
Christians, in my opinion, are rapidly losing power. They've been losing power for years. Their churches are empty. You tell me that there's all these Christians, not you, but like
Right.
like the left tells me there's all these horrible, awful Christians in the weeds waiting to abolish gay rights and, smash gays back in the closet and punch women back into the kitchen and all that. But meanwhile, the churches can't even fill the pews, and that churches are closing down everywhere. The inductions into the priesthood are rapidly falling, and most people that were Christians have moved on to alternate Christian churches. Like my family member, before they became an indoctrinated cultist into what I consider an actual far right Christian based group, and that which again, they're never going to gain prominence or power. They're a bunch of losers, and I hate to include my family member in there, but it's true. I mean, my family member got banned from Walmart because they show up with a Ford F-150 filled with water and said they blessed it and offered to redo people's baptisms.
Okay.
That's the level of fucking nut jobbery I'm talking about. And so no one's going to get on board with that as an actual lifestyle. There's going to be a fringe of people, but that's not going to take over the world. There's no way. Too many people, number one, aren't interested in it, and number two, can see right through it for what it is. It's a money grab. But anyways, so you can't fill the pews in the churches. Most people that now are identifying more agnostic and even atheistic than ever before. And then alternate religions with the growth of India and China. So we're seeing a lot more increase in Taoism. We're seeing stuff, some of the different religious aspects from India, and I have friends that are from India. And I find they're religious because here's the thing. We in Western Hemisphere, we've separated Christianity from politics pretty damn good compared to other countries. You go to India, politics and religion are so intertwined. They run parallel to each other. Islam is not just a religion. Islam is a culture. The culture is the religion. The religion is the culture. And they're never, well, unless we go there and we colonize, which we failed twice now, and not losing 2 wars in the Middle East, we'll never be able to separate the two from there. So at the end of the day, I'm not worried about Christian nationalism and Christo-fascism and that sort of thing. Christianity's on the out. I don't believe it. And when people try to bring that up as a scare, I'm not scared of that. I think it's a scare tactic that's brought up. The Handmaid's Tale and Ruth Bader Ginsburg and even with the ruling in the states about abortion, taking abortion out of the federal level and putting it back on the states. Again, that wasn't a right-wing Christo-fascist decision. That was a judiciary decision saying that it's up to the individual states. It was giving the states more power, which is how a republic functions. Now, again, I don't want to wade into the abortion debate.
That's not.
It's not really the area I'd like to go into. And even though I'm sure we'd actually probably agree on more than we would disagree, getting back to the books and that we were talking about, we are in this weird hyper here. I'm going to use a leftist term. We're in an intersection of 1984 and Brave New World right now. That's what we're in right now. Because because in Canada, if you don't like life in Canada, if things are a little too tough, we have SOMA here in Canada.
That's what I was going to ask you. It's
we legalize
the other note.
We legalize marijuana. It's legal in Canada. I can go to the store right now and go buy 30 grams of marijuana if I wanted to. And I can have it on my
That's not
person.
what I thought you were going to say. I thought you were going to talk about MAID.
Well, we can talk about that as well, but
But yeah,
drug
you continue
legalization
with,
is
yeah.
here. It's here.
Is it
And
just marijuana that's been legalized?
marijuana is legalized in the province of BC. The government is experimenting with providing hardcore drugs to the populace. So you can
Because it's
actually,
worked so well in San Francisco.
yeah. So in Vancouver right now, I can go to a very specific stores in Vancouver right now, and I can buy cocaine.
Oh shit.
Yeah, I could go there and buy cocaine. I could buy methamphetamine. Now there are prices an addict could never afford without destroying things and doing B&Es and robbing people. So the illegal trade is in no way, shape, or form disrupted. This is actually more for normies that want to, I guess, experiment and try things, try to do the college thing, I guess. But I anticipate over the next couple of years, and this is actually something I'm not opposed to. I anticipate that psychedelics will be legalized within 5 years. I'm actually not opposed to that because I think psychedelics in therapy are an incredible resource to be used and can be used very effectively in therapeutical situations. But it is pointing to a trend of just, well, if you're having a tough day or things seem too crazy, well, you can just go and buy your drugs and get high and blast off into space for a little bit and have a little private mini vacation in your head. And if you
Like
get addicted,
the Apple thing that they want you to put on your face that just
yeah,
came out.
yeah, and so and even now, like, so in Brave New World, children were sexualized the moment that they were born. They purposely sexualized children in Brave New World. They removed childhood innocence. And
Remind me, because I literally haven't read it. I read it after high school also, but it still was like a
so
long ass time
children
ago.
in and again, I have not read the book in a while, and maybe I should. I
Yeah.
probably should to be able to provide you with more succinct thing. But in Brave New World, once children reach a certain age, they are purposely sexualized. So they are encouraged to explore their bodies, explore other bodies and stuff like that. And it's the idea of destroying childhood innocence and that. Now, why in Brave New World, what is so dystopic about Brave New World? It is the ultimate class-based structure. There is no creativity. They don't have to have secret spies. They don't need to have secret police. They don't need to torture you because there's no alternative. You're so desensitized. There's no moral imagination. Here I am talking Kant now, but there's no moral imperative, no moral imagination. There's no idea of innocence or guilt or anything. It just doesn't exist. It is such a bland society, and it's completely class based. So the person that you're told you are going to be like the elevator conductor in the first chapter, every single day that person will go there and they will operate that elevator for the rest of their lives till they die. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, there's no self-actualization because there's no need for it in a society like that. People just go there and they're almost like robots, human
Yeah.
flesh robots. But who does get to explore and have fun and all that? Well, it's the upper class. It's the 1%. Movie that's truly underrated, I think, that showcases this perfect blend of Brave New World and 1984. Well, not perfect, but I think it does a damn good job of it, is Elysium. I think
That's
that
what I was
movie,
thinking. I was actually thinking of that.
that's our future, in my opinion. We will
Yeah.
have a hyper rich 1% that will live either on Earth somewhere where they've basically made it impossible to penetrate, inside the Earth, or they will live in just outside Earth's orbit, like in the case of the movie. And we will live shitty, meaningless lives, or we produce robots and AI that will make their lives up there so easy and so vast and so grand and so amazing. And we will praise them because of the small pittance of pity they take on us when they give us small comforts. That is the future I see for our society. And it's crony capitalism mixed in with governmental fascism and that true fascism. I'm not talking like, in that in Elysium, there's fascism, but it's not Hitler youth going around. There's no exterminations. The weakest people just die. They don't need to build camps. There's no need for that. And that's the idea of Brave New World. There's no need to build camps in Brave New World. That's not necessary. Everyone just knows what their place is because they've designed a system where you don't know any better. There's no innocence. There's no exploration. There's no wonder about the world. There's just your mundane job that you go to every single day, and you come back and you just exist. And when you finally have enough, when it's finally way too much, when things just get beyond your control, then you get to take your magic pill and go on a vacation for a little bit.
That sounds about right.
But are we almost there?
Yeah.
Are we not almost there already?
Yeah, it's yeah. I wanted to mention just something to you about 1984. That book was also very big for me in high school, and I wrote my senior paper on, well, one of two big papers. I wrote one on euthanasia, strangely enough, and then one on 1984. And boy, what a naive young lady I was, because in 1984, my argument was that could never happen, even though I, young, and I didn't know that it was already happening in other places, of course. But the title of the paper was called The Spirit of Man. And it was basically that I thought that it would be so boring for the powers that be to just have submissive, no fight back, just whatever, and just have everything they want, gluttony, that they just wouldn't want that. And that they need the pushback from the masses. And that's not true. They wouldn't be bored. They would just become more gluttonous. That's what I've learned.
Mm-hmm.
There
Oh,
is
no,
the
100%.
spirit of man wouldn't have any, they don't care about the spirit of mankind.
Well, we have to remember too that the people that often make it to the top of these food chains, the 1%ers, and that it's not all cases, but quite often many of them, they exhibit psychopathic traits, sociopathic and psychopathic traits. And it's really good for business and government. When you have no emotion about firing someone from a job, that makes you a really good boss if you're an authoritarian. They're when they're saying, then they're begging and they're saying, I'm gonna be out of a job. I can't put food on the table and that, and I'm gonna be homeless on the street. And you can just say, well, you should have performed better. You're out of a job. And that's a really good trait if you're an authoritarian. Now, let me ask you this, Mel.
Yeah.
What did we do during COVID for people that didn't want to get vaccinated? What did we have a whole group of people saying? Oh, you don't want to get vaccinated? Well, that's your choice, but choices have consequences. So you're going to lose your job. In Canada, we're not going to pay you EI that you paid into your whole life. They passed a law saying that if you refused the COVID vaccine, EI didn't have to pay you employment insurance, one of our social safety nets, if you lose your job. No, something you paid into your whole life, you're not entitled to. And the whole reason why, and this is my opinion, but I don't think I'm wrong, is that these people thought they were morally justified. Hey, you don't want to do this for the great betterment of society, for, what everyone else is doing in that, then we're going to punish you for it because you want to be an outlier. You don't want to wear the ribbon. You don't want to take the pill. And the end goal, they may not state it, but the end goal, in my opinion, of these authoritarian weirdos is that the people that refuse to take the vaccine would be so outcast by society that they kill themselves. That's my opinion. They actually wanted them to kill themselves. And maybe I'm completely wrong, but I don't think I'm off. I don't think I'm that far off base.
I have to tell you, when it comes to the COVID vaccine and the locks down and masks and all of those things, so I, of course, not really thinking, just like, fucking just get the thing. Who cares what? Like, well, there's really some big conspiracy. Like, we've taken vaccines, that's what I'm thinking the whole time. But lots of time has gone by. I'm now very confused about the issue. hopefully someday we'll all find out everything.
Can hope.
I think a lot of it. Yeah. So, but if I just take 2 seconds to think that if I really, 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 really hadn't wanted it and had been in a position where I would have lost my job if I hadn't got it, I really would not have liked that at all. It would have given me that same compelled speech feeling.
Well, it is. It's compelled medical procedure.
Right.
And really at the end of the day, the people that there's a lot of people that took it and just said, I'll just take it because I don't want to take it, but I'll take it because then I can just carry on with my life.
Yeah.
Now we go back to the idea of the Milgram experiments. Someone in a position of authority told people to shock someone they didn't know. And they were, because the person appeared to be in a position of authority, they were willing to administer shocks, including ones that were believed to be lethal. We thought we were better than that. We thought morally and societally we had moved past that. When we developed we had this great idea, we peaked in the 90s. We truly did. Our society, we peaked in the 90s completely because we almost got there. We almost had equality. We almost did. We almost got to that point. And then we sold everything to the banks. And I mean, that's a whole other story, but the problem is that we almost had it. We were almost there. And then I don't know what the hell happened, but we suddenly decided that we could start dividing people again, and that was going to be acceptable, and that we did it under the guise of the equality that we had, as societies, we had almost reached. And then it just showed to me the whole vaccine thing, the whole thing of, and I'm not even talking about, whether the vaccines work, whether or not it's making women have abortions or not, sort of thing. I'm just talking about in general, the whole concept of this coercion to take these things and that showcase that we really haven't gone that far. It was all boiling and seething under the surface. We really were not as egalitarian as we like to claim. Like the liberals tried to claim that we had gotten to. We had just gotten really, really good at hiding how vicious we really were.
Those humans, man.
Damn fallible humans. What the hell? Why can't we get it together?
Why can't we fucking get it together? Yeah, I loved the 80s, and I loved what I thought my life was going to look like. Yeah, I for sure thought I was going to live like Alexis Carrington from Dynasty. I don't know what gave me that idea, just that show. And that looked fun.
Well, I'll tell you, Mel, this goes back to, Chuck Palahniuk, when he wrote Fight Club, he hit a cultural vein there. But at the time, people took, in my opinion, the wrong message from it. They took a right message about hyper capitalism and they took a right message from that, the idea that things were going to make us happy and that, but it's not the case.
Mm-mm.
But they hit a cultural sort of thing there when in the movie, and again, the movie is such a better reference from the book, even though the book is much different than the movie is. The movie itself is a masterpiece. But in the movie there, when it's implied that we all thought we were going to grow up, or we were lied to. We were told we were going to all grow up to be rock stars and movie stars, and we were going to own the world. And Tyler in that movie, Brad Pitt in that movie playing Tyler Durden, hit the nail on the head. People walk around, they're miserable because we all thought we were going to win the lottery by now. And we we're all going to be millionaires living on yachts. Like that's the dream that was sold to all of us back in the 90s and the late 80s. It was all sold to us that if we just worked a little hard, we were going to have a wonderful life. We're going to have the big house. We're going to have the nice cars. We're going to have the purebred dogs, and we're going to have the, 2.5 kids, and everything was going to be great. And our lives.
I have one of those. I have a really gorgeous purebred dog. Please continue. It's all I could get of the American dream. The
there
dog.
we go. There we go. And that, and yeah, and we were sold that idea that if we just worked, and this, I know this sounds like a leftist concept and not so much a conservative concept. I still believe in the value of hard work, but again, the neoconservatives and the neoliberals and that, it's not about it's all about making the most amount of money in the shortest period of time, and everything else be damned. And that's not actually conservatism. Left will say, well, that's conservatism. No, conservatism is having a certain traditional value set and conserving certain aspects of our culture in an ever-changing world. For example, the left, in Canada and in the States, toppling statues down. We're toppling the statues of the colonizers and that. And I just, conservatives came out and they said, well, why are we toppling these down? Well, they were all colonizers and they owned slaves. And well, we can acknowledge that these people were not perfect and that they were products of their time. 100 years from now, we will be products of our time when
Yeah.
when they come back and they reveal all of our sins that we've committed.
Yeah.
And we,
Erasing history is not a good thing to do, people. And we should know this.
well, and I'm gonna say something, maybe it's a little controversial here. Erasing history became a lot easier to do when they started doing it for cigarettes. I'm actually going to come into the defense of cigarettes here,
I
not
fucking
because
miss smoking so badly.
not because I'm a former smoker myself, but what they started to do with the smoking campaigns back in the 90s and that, in 2000s, is they started to take old movies and they would digitally remove the cigarette smoking from the movies.
Wait, when did they do this?
Well, it's not happened everywhere, but what they've done is in certain areas, they've tried to instill this thing where they're trying to get rid of all the old references to cigarette smoking.
But it's so cool. You can't take away the cool.
So
Oh
if
my God.
they can't get rid of the cigarette smoking from the movies, what they do is they put a trigger warning on the front that these movies are products of their time, and it's not condoned. It's now known that smoking does this, smoking does that. I want to tell you there's one group of people that we are allowed to discriminate against completely in this world, and that's cigarette smokers.
Yeah.
Everyone else generally is off the table. Everything else is off the table except cigarette smoking. You can't criticize someone who drinks alcohol because they're an alcoholic and when they need to get help. And alcohol is a widely enjoyed social habit, even though it kills us just as much as cigarette smoking does. Well, maybe not as much, but almost as much. You can't criticize.
Well, I lost both of my best friends to alcohol, not cigarettes. So anyway.
Well, cigarettes are a slow death, right? Whereas if you are a hardcore methamphetamine addict, you can expect that probably within 10 years, you'll probably be dead. Maybe a little bit longer now that we have Narcan and that sort of thing. But you can expect that you're going to have a horrible quality of life and that your life is going to end tragically quicker. Cigarette smoking in Canada is one of the highest taxed sins in Canada. A pack of cigarettes in Canada now costs over $20.
Yeah. That's fucking great.
And it's all taxes. Literally a pack of cigarettes costs $1.80 to make, maybe $3 now with inflation to make. And the actual highest price that you're paying for the cigarettes is the tubes themselves that the tobacco goes into.
The paper.
But yeah, like the filters, right? Like that's where the most cost. That's why it's cheaper to buy it in bulk and roll your own. Yeah. And so at the end of the day, what we've done as society is we've said this is so morally horrible, even though most smokers will live to be in their 70s and 80s. And they're like, well, they're a burden on the healthcare system. Well, I'll tell you what's a burden on our fucking healthcare system right now. It's the fact that if I break my arm, I'm waiting in the fucking emergency room for 10 hours while they try to resuscitate a bunch of addicts that came in Friday night who had a fucking Friday night meth party. Mm-hmm. They're all on the nod and they're all freaking losing it. And I'm there in the waiting room with my broken arm. Not a priority. I'll tell you this right now. and I've caught an immeasurable amount of flack for this, and I don't care. The Canadian healthcare system sucks, and anyone that's told you it's the gold standard, they're a fucking liar. Fuck you, Michael Moore, you fucking lying fat piece of shit. Because he sold this idea of Canadian healthcare to Americans like it was the gold standard of how things should be run. I have sat, my mother, she's dead now, God rest her soul. My mother had a lot of health problems. She had mental health problems. Because of her, I got to experience the brunt of the Canadian healthcare system. I would be in the waiting room with her for 16 hours. They would be so short on beds at the hospital that my mother would be in a fucking gurney in the hallway. And that even when my mother was dying, when I went
That
to see her,
sounds very third world to me.
when my mother was dying, we had to go visit her in a shared room. She was in a room with 4 other people. Three other people. She was the 4th bed in there. And we were told, can you please keep it down when we were talking to her? Because it was late at night. She died like 3 days later. But and she died. And after that day, she was mostly incoherent after that day. Anyways, there was very little lucidity after that day. But she's in a room with 3 other people and she's literally dying. And we're in there basically saying our goodbyes to her. And the nurse is like, we just got a complaint from someone from the other bed. Can you please keep it down? Can you keep your mourning down? So we raised a stink and they found us a room, which is basically it was like an extra room at the end of one of the hallways on another floor. And then she died. And once she was dead, it was a big thing to get us out of there right away. They wanted us out of there. Like they needed that bed for someone else. And that's our Canadian healthcare system. That is our healthcare system. My friend Maria, she started feeling numbness in her toes at one point. And so she went to the doctor. Doctor said it's probably nothing, gave her some quick medication, but then the numbness kept persisting and it grew at constant pins and needles. Went to another doctor because she doesn't have a family doctor because it's impossible to get a family doctor in Canada. So there's no continuity of your medical history anywhere. She went to another doctor and that doctor did get some tests done, which she got done months later because she was on a waiting list. When it was finally done, it was revealed that she had a tumor in her brain, small tumor. They ordered the biopsy, which took about 6 months to get done. They ordered some other tests. It all took a very long time.
That should take like 3 fucking days.
Eventually,
Jesus Christ.
The tumor got so big that they determined it was inoperable and that she needed to go to palliative care. So she's an immigrant to Canada. She went back to Brazil. The doctors in Brazil lost their fucking minds. They said, you should have just came here right away. As soon as you knew the diagnosis, you should have came here. It was easily treatable. When it was in its smallest form, we could have done a small incision. It would have been minimal brain involvement. We could have gotten it out of there, done a few rounds of chemotherapy and that kind of blasting the leftover cells. But yeah, you got 6 months to live now. And she's dead now. And it's on our Canadian healthcare system. And you can't sue them. You can't bring them to court. They've given themselves basically like the US equivalent to qualified immunity, malpractice insurance, and it's a scam. So anyone that tells you that Canadian healthcare system is the gold standard, they're a fucking liar, and they're most likely privileged. We want to talk about what privileged is. They're privileged enough that that they haven't had any serious health issues, or if they have, that they've managed to be what I call the Swiss cheese. They've managed to get through the whole thing with as little issues as they can. Now, what I will say is I do believe that the Canadian healthcare system in general gets prescriptions right. I will say that. Hearing that people got to pay like $200 for insulin in the States, that's crazy. To me, that just shows that there's a lack of competition there. Here, it's because our taxes are so high, but it wouldn't be that way if there's more manufacturers able to manufacture, and then there's competition. So of course, price has to reduce and things like that. But
so as far as the way the system works, I don't know if you know what our Medicare is like for people? Is it like that? Like it's a free, this is for old people, but it's free and it's just for everyone, but it's just like not that great. You don't get to go to the best doctors because you're
Yeah,
not
like
paying top dollar.
pretty
Okay,
much, yeah. It's like your equivalent to Medicare,
I see.
um, and that, and again, it's, healthcare is important, and people should have access to healthcare. And I say that from an idea that's an economic advantage if people are able to go into the workplace and innovate and create and produce because they're healthy. I think that
Right.
that is important. Um, I think that the best way to do it is to have a two-tiered healthcare system, a hybrid model of private public. For example, I needed an MRI at one point. Um, I was on a waiting list. I paid out of my pocket to go to a private clinic. Out in Western Canada, we have limited private clinic options because healthcare is provincial. It's not a federal jurisdiction. So out west, Western Canada, we have enabled some private practices to take the pressure off the system. So
Okay.
I could have waited for a public MRI. I'm on a list. My name reaches top of the list. I get called to go and do it, and I get it done. I chose to pay a hefty sum of money out of pocket and go and do it myself. And I think that that model should be more incorporated into our healthcare system. Um, I don't think that it should be a model where the public is so garbage that it's not even worth it. But our current system is not sustainable, and we're seeing it fail. And I want to preface this before we get into MAID and that. We have a famous case in Canada. Robert Latimer from Saskatchewan, where I'm located right now. He was a decently Christian man, who did what many consider to be a very unchristian-like act. Um, he had a daughter who was severely disabled. This is years ago. This is back in the 90s. I think he was convicted in 1995. Oh man, I'm going to get fact checked on that one, but that's all right. I think it was 95 or 97. He had a severely handicapped daughter. I'm talking like every day was miserable. Surgeries that had just months of excruciating pain, epidurals to just numb out nerve receptors, and that. This child had a very miserable existence, and they tolerated it for years. When I say tolerate, I don't mean that in a rude way. I don't want people to think I'm saying in a rude way. Because anyone that has a child that has a disability, I think is not tolerating, but they're suffering in ways that other people don't. Like, it's just a fact of life. And that's not me
Yeah.
being an activist or being an intersectionalist or anything like that. That's just, you know, um, I think it's very admirable parents that, because quite often these days you can find out in the womb if they're going to have a disability, and parents make decisions based off of that. But this wasn't a child that had a stutter or ADHD or, was born missing a arm or something like that. This was a child who had, I believe, again, I need to look it up again, but I believe it was pretty severe spina bifida and that. So we're talking like couldn't talk, like very, very difficult, couldn't exist normally with other people, constant pain, medication, like a miserable existence, but an existence nonetheless. Robert Latimer was told by a doctor that his daughter needed another surgery. It was going to have a 6-month recovery period. It was going to be extremely painful for his child. Extremely painful. I'm talking the surgery was going to cause an excruciating amount of pain that would need to heal in order for this wasn't going to guarantee any sense of normality either. This wasn't going to be the final surgery that fixed everything. This was just
Just
another
a
surgery,
surgery, right?
another surgery on a long list of surgeries. Upon receiving that news the next day, Robert Latimer's family went to church. And while they were at church, he stayed home. He put his daughter into his truck and he fed the exhaust hose into the truck, and he killed his daughter. He was found guilty of murder. It was a very controversial, contentious case. And at the time, this is what I mean about Canadian values changing and the changing of values in our country. In my opinion, the reduction of liberalism to progressive bullshit. At the time, they put him in prison because they wanted to send a message that euthanasia, because of disability, was not acceptable. That was not going to be acceptable, regardless of the severity of the disability. And disability advocates came out and said, hey, my kid is ADHD, you know, are we going to gas them next? Now, very disingenuous assertion. This was a very fringe radical case, but they had their say. And people, we did not have the moral gumption for that. We did not believe that that was going to be acceptable as a society. So we convicted Robert Latimer, I say the people, through the courts, of murder, and gave him a life sentence. Jump to 2021, medical assistance in dying legislation. Court system, someone said it's their right to kill themselves, and that the state has a right to provide the medical services to do so. The court agreed, because like I told you earlier, we're run by the courts now, and the courts are captured thanks to our charter. And so now the government was given a mandate by the courts. The government was given a mandate by the courts. By a certain time, they had to have a system in place for euthanasia. And that's where medical assistance in dying came from. Now, medical assistance in dying was originally conceived as a last ditch option for people with terminal illnesses. So someone has a terminal illness, you ain't coming back from this illness. Your quality of life is so poor. You've made the decision that you wish to go, and you wish to go on your terms, and you want to do it in a way that's respectful. You don't want your husband to come home and find you hanging from the rafters or something like that. And if I sound crass, I'm not trying to be rude or anything. I'm just trying to be as realistic as possible, right? You know, like the realities of suicide and that. And so what started off as something that was supposed to be rare and safe, I guess, you know, similar to the original, and again, we're not going to get into it, but the original abortion debate, right? Rare and safe, right? Has morphed into, in typical Canadian fashion, has morphed into an awful system now, where basically poor people who have medical concerns are just, they're being offered by the government made. There's been some complaints. For example, we have Afghanistan veterans in Canada, who are suffering, and their caseworkers, who are government workers, have told them, hey, have you considered MAID? You're a veteran, you served our country. You're not getting any better. You're still struggling. They're saying, we're tired of your file, and we're tired of the fact that you won't get better. So have you considered, you know, killing yourself through the government? So, and it's not just, so it went from being something that was supposed to be like last ditch, and now we've developed we're in typical Canadian fashion, we've developed an industry around it now. So nonprofit groups that are pro dying, which by the way, almost every nonprofit in Canada gets federal funding. So they might as well be a federal department, in my opinion, because they're mostly, we could have a really long conversation about how all these lobbyist groups are funded by the federal government, but which should be illegal. But anyways, so there's these nonprofits.
So they're lobbying themselves.
They're lobbying. They're lobbying against the government using government funding. So they're saying the government's not going far enough, using funding they got from the government, which should be illegal. It's antithetical. But anyways, that's a whole other conversation. I'm doing more research on. I actually plan on doing more talks about that on my podcast in the future. But now there was a very, very disturbing clause that was in there. There was two disturbing clauses. One was deferred for a year, and it just got deferred again. So they haven't made a decision on it because the pushback was so great. One of the clauses that made you eligible for MAID in Canada that was deferred was that you could apply for MAID based solely on a diagnosis of a mental illness.
Mm.
So right now you need to have some type of physical ailment that renders you that you're going to have for life, that renders you unable to, you need assistance basically in that, and that you choose to die instead. So you have to have some type of physical ailment. It can be a mixture of mental and physical, but there has to be a physical ailment. But they've deferred the one. So basically, if I get diagnosed with depression, instead of, working with me, I can just say I want MAID. And then under our legislation, all help stops. Well, they want MAID. Okay, now we need to go through this process. In my opinion, if I don't think it's acceptable, I think it's just going to end up, I think what they say, like 3.3% of the Canadian population over the last 3 years died via medical assistance in dying or something like that. Now, mind you, we have a radically smaller population than the United States does, but it's extremely disturbing. I think it's 3 point. I'd have to relook up the stats, but it's higher than it's higher than like 0.01%. It's so it's not as rare as people think. And now they've done several things of people that are in the MAID process that are less Landry. I don't even know if he's still alive anymore. I think he deleted his Twitter account. But he was someone that was on disability, and he can't afford his apartment anymore on disability because of everything that costs. So he went through MAID and he plans on dying because he can't live off of the disability payments and all that sort of thing. There's been cases now. The most worrying thing, and there's been a lot of stuff. There's a lady I know from Calgary. She's in the MAID process right now. She's a detransitioner.
Lois.
Yes.
I was going to ask if you knew about her. She's
I-
God. It's killing me to watch her post about this, and it's killing all of us. But it's
her
continue.
choice.
Yeah, I know.
It's her choice, and I
Yeah.
have to respect that. And
for sure, I don't know what I can't only imagine what her experience is for her to want to do this.
yeah, and again, so now we're seeing stuff where other medical failures in our system, like transitioning kids and transitioning people with, Matt Walsh, for love him or hate him, he just revealed the other day that basically the transition process in the States is a big insurance scam. It's a big scam. It's an insurance scam. That a lot of these transitioning things, they're basically they're using insurance, and they're basically getting people to do these surgeries off of 20-minute consultations.
Yeah,
Like
that's what I heard.
And you know what? Love him or hate him, he's making a difference. He's showcasing just how deep the rot goes.
Well, I finally got to see What Is a Woman, and I really feel like everyone should see it, regardless of their thoughts of him or anything else. But it's important.
To really segue briefly, what I found amazing about What Is a Woman is that they just let these people talk, and these people talk themselves. Yeah, Matt's a little disingenuous when he said he wasn't hostile towards them. The line of questioning was definitely pointed, but hey, it's up to you. You're the one having this ideology. You're going to have to substantiate it, and then they can't. And they just go back to, it always comes back to, well, why do you care so much? Not your life. What type of fucking reasoning is that? Well, of course I care. I'm a member of society. We all are.
I'll take your "it's a religion" one step further, because I've been calling it since I sort of peaked. It's a cult.
It is a cult.
Exactly like a cult.
100%, 100%. But to tie it back to MAID, now we have people that were victims of medical malpractice that are now requesting a medical procedure to end their life. But yeah, it's so the last thing that they have right now going on, and this is the most terrifying thing to me, is that there's 2 more provisions they want to bring in. They haven't brought them in yet. And one of them is, in my opinion, it's post-birth abortion, and we'll discuss that. And the other one is teenagers. So there's 2 provisions they haven't brought in yet. I did a Substack article on this if anyone's interested, where I kind of delve a little bit deeper into it. But there's a provision that they're looking at right now, where if your baby is born and they figure the baby will not have a good quality of life, that the parents can choose to have the baby mated. Yes. In my opinion, that's a post-birth abortion. Here's the thing. The parents can choose that up to a year past birth. That's what they're proposing. So how many mothers have postpartum depression?
Oh my
How many
God.
mothers, that first year is the worst year. So they get 6 months. They're like, I can't do it. I just can't fucking do it. So, and here's the thing, MAID is supposed to be a personal choice. That baby doesn't have a choice. And again, I'm not getting into the debate on abortion. That's not where I want to go here and that for this talk, but this is important because we're talking about the baby's already been born. It's out of the womb, it's born, and you realize, okay, well, it has a disability and that. So under this new thing, they're saying up to a year, you can have the baby mated, you can have the baby killed.
Wow.
And it's not murder or infanticide or anything like that. It's just a medical procedure. That's what they always hide behind. Well, they're just having a medical procedure. I'm like, is George Carlin in the room with me right now? You can just say, we're killing your grandmother. The state is killing your grandmother. We can just be honest about it. Instead, yeah, they had this pamphlet that came out for kids explaining MAID to children. It came out from a nonprofit. It was a coloring book that children could have where they could learn about
Whoa.
MAID and all that sort of thing.
Why? What sort of fucking agenda is that? Is there money to be made from it? I don't understand.
Well, I do agree that, if grandma's choosing to kill herself through the state, children are going to have questions and stuff like that, but they don't need a children's coloring book. You just give information to the parents, and the parents can sit down with their child and they can, I guess, explain it the best they can about what
Yeah.
grandma's choosing to do. They can say, grandma's sick, and because of that, grandma, she's going to
But I
go.
mean the whole MAID agenda in general. Like, why do they want to why would you want to be reducing your population?
Because at the end of the day, like I said, it's all about progressivism cannot stop. As soon as they draw a line in the sand, they're not progressive
Oh,
anymore.
I see.
So that's why it couldn't just be for old people. In rare cases, they've had to expand it to babies because we have to go to the bottom of the barrel. We can't draw a line in the sand. Oh, just old people? Well, that sounds conservative. And that, why not babies? Why can't we do disabled babies? It sounds stupid to say, but that's the line of thought. But even more scary than babies, and I know this is, we're like, how could it get even worse than babies? There's another proposal in the works for teenagers. And this one here is that teenagers can choose to kill themselves with or without their parents' permission.
And teenagers' brains are like they're pretty much insane. I mean, that's the whole area where you can't
Yep.
be trusting these humans because their
Nope.
brain development.
No. So we have a system now where
Mhm.
we don't have a system now. We have the MAID system, but they're proposing that if a teenager has a physical disability and accompanied by a mental disability, now again, remember, they may pass away, can just be mental illness. Well, what you just said it, what teenager isn't crazy, right? Because they're going through, puberty and hormones and all that sort of stuff. Imagine you go to a supper and, with your friends, and they have a teenager, and you show up and you're like, hey, where's Sally? Oh, Sally's not with us anymore. And that she chose MAID and all that because she was feeling depressed. It was her decision. We supported it.
Yeah, that's
Like, can you imagine that? Like, but
well,
here's
what I'm thinking about as you're talking is when I was in high school, I was bullied, and it was bad. It was like being shamed in front of an entire assembly while you're in the middle of like a cheerleading
oh
performance.
man,
Like
that's awful.
fucking bad.
Wow.
Yeah. And kids don't drink because then you'll end up in situations where people bully you for dumb shit that you do when you're drunk. Anyways, I had written like suicide notes, just because I was having suicidal ideation. Because as a teenager, look, it's still there. Like I can feel it. And my parents went through my trash and found them. I had like ripped it up and they like taped it together, and like I'm in a therapist's office and I'm like, well, you went through my fucking trash. What? But like I could be dead. if I
Mhm.
was raised in Canada, and freaking look at me now, a whole life behind me with all of these great adventures in the middle of
Mhm.
doing a podcast because I can, like,
Well,
fuck.
many teenagers without even, talking like any of the special interest situations and that feel suicidal while they're teenagers just because of all the changes they're going through and the changes in life and things like that. But the most disturbing element of MAID, they want to do what's called mature minor. That's what they're calling it. They want to pass a legislation where you can be determined to be a mature minor. If that passes, then without your parents' permission, you can request MAID. So your parents could be fighting tooth and nail, don't do it, don't do it, and the state will still kill you.
And will that just be valid for maid, or can you decide, oh, I'm a
Uh-oh.
mature child and I'd like to move in with my high school teacher because I'm smart
Here we
and
go. There you go. You see it. You see it.
yeah.
Thank you. You see it. But the thing is, I on Twitter, and of course, Twitter is just a cesspool of shit too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I tell people that, and they're like, "Oh, that's just a right wing. That'll never happen. That's just a right wing fantasy, and that's just projection." And that I'm like, no. Once you deem that someone can be declared to be a mature minor for one thing, you don't think that slippery slope can't go all the way to pedophilia? Oh, you bet your fucking ass it could. You
Wow.
bet it fucking could. And you bet there would be people out there fucking pushing it too.
Oh yeah.
That's
Well,
why
yeah.
despite the fact that, I've been in a same-sex relationship and that for a long time, I don't believe the term love is love. I don't believe that term. I don't believe that term at all, because that term just opens up too many doors. And don't kid yourself, there is a lot of perverts out there, a lot of perverts,
I'm learning.
and
Mm-hmm.
they are constantly trying to find ways to get legal access to victims. And I say this, one of my siblings, when I've been pretty open about this, I've spoken about multiple other podcasts. When I was a child, one of my siblings was repeatedly molested and raped by another family member over a series of years. And there's a whole dynamic of how this person got away with it for so long before my sibling told someone. But there is no situation out there where a child can consent to be with an adult. There is no
No.
situation. And if anyone thinks there is, they're a fucking pervert. They're a fucking disgrace, and they should throw themselves into a wood chipper.
Yeah, it's definitely not up for debate. I was a child development major before I was a psychology major, and anyone who knows anything about brain development, just if they come up with any other answer, then there's something wrong with their fucking brain development, because children cannot consent.
Well,
Period.
what's interesting too is I think in the future we're going to be able to determine a lot of interesting things, because they've shown that someone that commits murder, for example, has brain patterns and that neuro brain pattern functions that don't exist in people that have not committed murder. And that because as soon as you have, we all have extreme situations codified into our psyche, and there's patterns, that synapse development and patterns that link together when certain acts are committed in the brain, that are I guess more codified because of that. um, and I think in the future they're going to be able to determine a lot of things just based on how human how your brain is connected, like the plasticity of your brain is connected to different things.
Right. It'll
I
be like a little map, like this is that situation and this is that
Mhm.
situation. Oh, that's fascinating.
And I'm not talking bullshit like the old school science where they used to measure people's skulls to determine things. Like that's all
No.
bullshit science. I'm talking, they've shown patterns. People that have committed certain crimes, murder, rape, and that they have patterns of how they react to certain things, and that how it lights up in their brain is different than regular people. Now, because we're all different and we all have a unique pattern, I don't know how viable that will be in the future. And I don't want to get into Minority Report stuff either, because I don't think that's a viable thing either. But I think it would need to be a tool that could be used as part of assessment, but I don't think it could be
Like a
the
lie
end all
detector
be all.
test, right?
Well, lie detector tests are complete bullshit.
Really?
Lie detector test is complete BS. That's why they're not admissible in court. The lie detector test is completely inadmissible in court. The lie detector test relies completely on the interviewer. The actual machine itself is just there to freak you out. Everything else is the interviewer. So let's say I interviewed you for a lie detector test and I said, Mel, have you ever stolen anything before?
Yep.
And you're like, when I was 12, I stole makeup from Walmart. And and because you're nervous, right? You're looking at the machine and things are going and things are beeping, and you're like, oh my God, what the heck? They're gonna think I'm a serial stealer, they're gonna think I'm a kleptomaniac, and now you're all psyched up, and that's what they want. And so, okay. Have you stolen the last 5 years? No, I haven't stolen the last 5 years. And then what they do is they say, Mel, are you sure? Because I'm looking at this test here and it's telling me that something's not quite right. So maybe you want to kind of give you a second here to think back. Anything at all? Anything? You said you stole some makeup when you were 12. So did you take anything? Maybe do you take stationery from the office or something like that? Did you do this? And that's how
You know
they
what I'm
do it.
thinking of? I'm thinking of the Chris Watts lie detector test. Did you watch that?
No.
That guy who murdered his wife and kids because he wanted to date some other chick. Fucking loser. It's on his interrogations and all of that are required. I love watching police interrogations. It's like one of my favorite things to do. But they have his lie detector test, and I mean, the lady is just so like, the test is over and she's like, okay, so I mean, we both know obviously that you
There
lied
we
through the
go.
whole thing. So that makes a lot
There
of
we
sense.
go. So she didn't actually know they lied through the whole thing. She got him to admit through.
They just knew he was fucking guilty because it was super obvious.
Yeah, and the police are allowed to lie to you. So they psyched him up with
Right.
the test, and then they lied to him, and then he turned around and he confirmed his crime. I'll tell you this.
He didn't because he's an idiot, but yeah, I see. That's normally that's how they get more information. Yeah.
I'll tell you this right now, and I'll listen. And this goes for your audience. Don't ever talk to the police.
Yeah.
I think the left and the right can agree on something.
Lawyer up.
The state has no interest in actually protecting you. The job of the police is to prosecute and put you in jail. Victim rights, especially in Canada, mean nothing. So don't ever talk to the police. If they want to come and we just want to talk to you, we just want to question you. No. If they, don't ever, and the only words you should be saying to them is your name, your date of birth, because you have to give that, and that you want a lawyer. And then everything they say after that. I had someone tell me before that the Hells Angels and that they're like a famous biker gang in Canada. They actually train their members, if they ever get called in by the police, that they're to find a spot on the table in the room, and they're supposed to stare at that spot and focus all their concentration on that spot until their lawyer arrives. They're not saying anything else. Doesn't matter.
Don't get baited.
Yeah. Do you want a coffee or anything like that? Only thing they do is to stare at that spot on the table until the lawyer arrives. That's it. Nothing else.
That's great advice.
And if they move you to the cell, then they move you to the cell. And that would be my advice to any person. Please say, I just got to talk to you for a minute. I don't have a minute.
Even if you're innocent, because honestly, if they have a case they need a head for, they'll use yours if they have to. I watch so much true crime and documentaries, and like I said, all the police, like lawyer the fuck up.
Well, I'll leave you with this, and I'm going to recommend a YouTube channel if people want to see more for like policing stuff and that. Watch the show Audit the Audit. I'll put a
link in the show notes.
They go through video body cameras of police interactions and that, and they just showcase just how police will act in situations, and you quite quickly realize, yes, there are good cops out there that do good work, and they're there because they care about their communities and that, but there's just as many people that are just looking for reasons to put you in jail at any cost. So I suggest people watch that show Audit the Audit, which will showcase to you exactly why the hell you don't talk to the police about anything. and that, or if you talk to the police, you do it on your terms and you only tell them what you want to tell them, nothing else.
Yeah. Well, Russell, this has been really fun and really informative. And I so appreciate you coming on and humoring me and sharing all of this with me.
Well, I really want to thank you, Mel, for letting me be on your show today and letting me kind of talk for the better, oh man, for like almost 2 hours here.
Yes.
It's been a lot of fun. Usually it's kind of the old switcheroo. Usually I'm on the other side. So I hope your audience was able to gain some insights into a few different topics and realize that not all conservatives are Christo-fascists out there to, take over the world and do bad things and all that. We just want a fair and equitable society where people can be successful in that.
Yeah. Do you want to share your socials? I mean, I'll put them in the show notes too, but if there's anything you want to plug.
Yeah, I'll plug a couple things really quick. So I have my YouTube channel, The Canadian Conservative. I don't post on there quite as often as I should. My life's really busy. I work 2 jobs and that. So I'm on Twitter at the Canadian Con, which is funny because it sounds bad, but that's the maximum number of letters Twitter will let me have to spell it out. But you can find me on there. I do Substack as well. So the CanadianConservative.substack.com. Working on a few articles right now. And then I also I actually do satire as well. So the Mechanical Moose is a satire thing that I started a little while ago to try to compete with the Babylon Bee, which will
Oh, how
never happen.
fun.
But just
Hey,
something.
you don't know that.
She laughs right back